Man, this is Deion Dawkins, man, and you're listening to The Scoop on OurScoop.com. You already know.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Scoop, OurScoop.com's weekly podcast. We are on to episode 34 of season 10. I'm your host, OurScoop.com editor John DeCarlo. We have sort of a full house with us today. No Kyle Gauss, no Ryan Mack. Ryan, as Colin has told us, is maybe like 2 hours into an 8-hour layover down in Miami, returning from a spring break trip from Colombia. We'll ask Colin about that. We do have Colin Schofield, Johnny Zwizlak, Jason Yavis with us, and sitting with us on the Scoop here today, right from the outset in the intro, which means she's going to be participating in On or Around This Date and all the fun hijinks that ensues, is Temple women's basketball coach Diane Richardson. Diane, thanks for making time for doing this. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for adding me to the crew today.
No problem. Diane, before we get into all the other housekeeping stuff they have to do, you were just telling us, you were showing us on Zoom, you guys just got some new T-shirts for the Big Five championship, and you have people coming in to pick them up today?
Yes, absolutely. It's exciting around here.
You know, obviously a lot of big basketball ahead of you, but what did that Big Five title mean? Because again, and now you got the American Athletic Conference championship on your mind, but the Big Five thing, just to look at those T-shirts and kind of enjoy that for a second, what did that mean?
Yeah, it means a lot because, when I came to Philly, not knowing too much about the Big Five, once I got here, I realized how big it is for the city. And that's been a goal, since it's a matter of pride and a little trash talk in the city. And so we went out and the team played well and we're Big Five champions. And now I guess we can talk trash for a year.
Yeah, you certainly can. Certainly can. We've got a lot of fun stuff ahead with Diane Richardson and the crew here. We'll have a spring football update or two, some men's hoops updates as well. Adam Fisher and his crew are also getting ready to head down to Fort Worth. The Scoop, as always, is brought to you by Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers. If you've been injured while on the road or the highway and the crash was someone else's fault, the insurance company is not going to be on your side. You need us, Temple Law grads, who will fight hard to get the compensation that you deserve. We only get paid if we win. So in Pennsylvania or New York, call us today at 215-261-7359. That's 215-261-7359. And you can find them on the web at greenspans-law.com. So Diane, like I said, we do On or Around This Date, which is the brainchild of your favorite. I don't know. I should ask you, do you have a favorite Temple women's basketball beat reporter? You have Colin, Johnny, and Jay here. Ryan did offer to be on the Scoop. I told him to enjoy himself in his Miami layover. Do you have a favorite? Have you picked out a favorite beat reporter?
No, I am not going to do that. You're not going to set me up here, John.
Oh.
I love all of them.
It's okay. You don't want to hurt Colin and Jay's feelings. It's okay. I understand.
Johnny, as usual, competing. He's a competitor. He's scrappy. So On or Around This Date was Declan Landis's brainchild. So it's a little bit of trivia and some fun. Johnny, do you want to lead us off here? I think you should do Diane the honors of asking her what we would like to start with.
I was getting there, John. Don't worry. Of course, I was going to ask Coach what you wanted to start with. So obviously, John mentioned we do trivia about like events or famous birthdays that happen around the date of like the day we're recording or the day the podcast comes out. But we're going to do today, the day we're recording. Coach, would you like to start with birthdays or events?
Well, I've got to say today is the birthday of Felicia Abiola. So Felicia Jacobs Abiola on our team, our freshman, today's her birthday. We celebrated that with her today. So cool. I would say that's the famous person for me today.
So we'll start with birthdays to honor that. We're going to do March 6th which is the day that we are recording. On March 6th, 1972, this famous NBA basketball player was born. He was drafted first overall in 1992, won 3 straight NBA championships with the Lakers.
Shaq?
Correct. Shaquille O'Neal was the correct answer. Jay, do you want to give your birthday that you have?
Yes. Also on March 6th, we're going back really far. Born March 6th, 1820. This civil rights leader, that's very obvious, but was very useful in rescuing slaves through the Underground Railroad.
Harriet Tubman.
Harriet Tubman. Colin, you're slacking right now. No answers from you in the first two. You know,
That's crazy.
I'm disappointed.
I didn't have it quick enough. I didn't have it quick enough.
All right, we're
Oh,
going to move over to events now. On this day in 1924, on March 6th, the Egyptian government opened the mummy case of this king, of ruler of Egypt. In
King
the
Tut.
correct. I didn't even get to
Mhm.
give the hint.
Just quick with it.
That's crazy. Jay, you can go ahead and give your event.
Okay. So this was March 6th, 1857. This U.S. Supreme Court case ruled that African Americans could not be U.S. citizens.
Jim Crow.
No.
1857?
1857.
A civil rights case?
Yes. Yeah.
Dang it. It's on the tip of my tongue. Oh, not Dred Scott. No.
It is Dred Scott. It
Dred
is
Scott,
Dred Scott.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
All
that
right.
was on or around this day.
There we go.
Does that mean I win?
You
I
do
did have a
win.
couple.
I did win.
That was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yes. This
The
was
clean sweep.
more, I mean, we kind of tailed it back. Usually these two, Johnny and Jason, tend to argue. Johnny threatens to cut out Jason's mic.
I
Johnny
don't have the board
threatens-
in front of me, or I would have.
They argue
You
a
guys
little
are
bit.
competitive, huh?
Yes, they are.
It's a bit more civil this episode.
Yeah, it was good. That was good. So yeah, Diane, normally it would be a little bit longer, but we know that you're busy and obviously you're preparing your team for the American Athletic Conference tournament. You're going to be the 4 seed down in Fort Worth. Take us through what happens between now and when you play Monday down in Fort Worth. When do you leave, and what have you learned from past seasons in terms of just the little things outside of practice to get the team ready?
Yeah, well, we don't play till Monday and with the double bye. So we had practice today and just worked on us things, typically on before a game, we're scouting the other team, but right now we don't know who we're playing, but we worked on us and we worked on our defense, which has really gotten us this far in this season. We're leaving tomorrow, so we'll be down in Fort Worth tomorrow night.
How do you feel, but even before we get to the potential opponents, whether that's Tulsa or potentially FAU or Charlotte, when you look at practice, your own team, and doing some self-scouting, you obviously mentioned that your defense has gotten you this far. How do you feel about where you guys are as a team right now heading into next week?
Well, obviously I feel better than, us being a 9. I forgot what they had as preseason, 9 or 8. But for us to be in number 4, it's a good feeling, but we're not done yet. And so as a coach, we want to win the tournament, and we are concentrating on doing that. And whoever we face, we know that our defense has got to drive us. And so we've been working on that and feeling good about it. We had a good practice today, and I'm sure we'll have one tomorrow as well.
You mentioned the defense, and it's kind of a big part of what we saw in the matchup against Charlotte, where in the first quarter you come out slow, you only score 4 points, but the defense kind of keeps you in it, and then the offense picks up in the second half. But what else did you kind of see from that you were kind of impressed with, or you think needs to improve that you worked on in practice heading into the tournament?
Yeah, well, I think Charlotte stepped up their game, and they've had their last 6 or 7 games, they've been really clicking, and so we knew that coming in, and it showed with their defense against us, which kept us from scoring. But I think both of us, neither of us shot the ball very well, but we battled in, and it was a good tough game going down the stretch, and we won it out with free throws.
You've talked a lot about your equal opportunity offense since you've been at Temple, and it's been a staple of what you guys do, where everyone gets involved, everyone that's on the court has a chance to score and make something happen. But for someone that might be listening that might just be getting into Temple women's basketball, can you give us a definition of what it means and how long that's been a part of your approach as a head coach for your programs?
Yeah, well, I believe in equal opportunity offense because I believe in making each of our players better. And by giving them confidence and willing to be able to score the ball. But on the other side, it also allows us to not be double teamed. It makes it difficult defensively for our opponents because it's hard to double team one player or 2 players when you've got 5 players that can score on the court. So, it's kind of like a double meaning, giving them confidence in themselves as basketball players, but also having a better offensive weapon so that we're not double teamed.
I wanted to follow up on it too, because obviously, like, there are times where, Jar East or Tarriyonna Gary are having a lights out game. Like, how do you kind of balance like the equal opportunity offense while also kind of trying to stay with the hot hands? Like, if Tarrionna's knocked down 4 straight threes, like, how do you guys kind of balance that? Is it a go with the flow kind of thing, or is it just like there's a set plan for it?
Well, obviously, if they're hot, we're going to get them the ball. But the other thing is, none of our players play 40 minutes. So when they're out, somebody else has to step up. And if they're used to doing that, it makes it easier for us. So there's no drop off offensively.
Coach, I want to go back to the defense here for a second. Just what has worked well for you guys on the defensive end of the ball this season? And as you head down to Dallas here in a couple days, where do you think you still might have to improve on the defensive end?
Well, I think our pressure defense has worked well for us, but we want to be able to pressure everybody. So we have a saying, pressure the ball, pressure your man. So even if you're not on the ball, you're pressuring your person so that they don't get the ball. So, it's got to be a 5-man pressure deal, team defense.
I know you said you're not looking at your opponents necessarily, but it is in the back of your mind a little bit. Looking at Tulsa in particular, how do you think you guys kind of match up with them, and what are you looking at in the matchup? Obviously, earlier this season you beat them 73-71 off a nice, my Oliver tip in. But how are you kind of just looking at the matchup now, potentially, facing them? And I know Delaney Crawford had a big game when you matched up against them previously.
Yeah, she did. And we were ahead in the game. They fought back and came back. We lost Tierra East in the second half to injury, and they came back, and we got a shot up and then missed, and Amaya Oliver tipped it back in. But I think we still match up with them. They've got some great shooters, and Delaney Crawford can shoot the skin off the ball. But we've got to be able to. She's going to have to get through our pressure too. So I think we match up well with them, and we're going to see that on Monday.
With the scouting report aspect, FAU, like, while they're the 13 seed, we've seen teams get hot even when they're the lower seed, getting a chance to play more games. And they also played you tough when you guys went down there. You beat them by 6. Like, what do you see from them? And what do you think about teams like getting hot and playing more games and coming at you guys with momentum?
Yeah, that's the thing about this conference. Like, on any given day, somebody can win, and it depends on how resilient teams are, and then how hard their players want to win. And every team in this league has talented players, and so you can't count anybody out. I mean, we look at Rice from last year, was a lower seed, and they ended up winning the tournament. So there's a lot of parity in this league, and you can't take anybody light.
In that Rice game, Coach, obviously that's a tough loss to think about from a year ago. Your two leading scorers from this year, Tiara East and Tarriyonna Gary, kind of had rough games back last year, going just a combined 5 for 21 from the floor. Now, clearly that loss is not just about them. It wasn't only on their shoulders. But do they kind of talk about wanting to get back to that point and redeeming themselves, or is that not really part of their process and not really something that they're thinking about heading down to Dallas this year?
Yeah, I think that especially the players that that are returning are really concentrating on letting that not happen again. Like, we don't want that to happen again. And I think going into this week and this weekend, their minds are focused on, like, it can't be close, so that kind of thing can happen to us. And they're on the get back tour, so we want to get back to and get back at those teams that beat us.
And now, kind of going beyond T-Mac and Tiara, who else are you kind of looking for to maybe step up and play a significant role down in Fort Worth and play an important role in really important basketball games?
Well, obviously we have our equal opportunity offense, but then we also have players that we expect to do a great job. Kayla Turner coming off the bench, Jaleesa Molina using her length and her rebounding ability, Anissa Rivera coming off the bench as well. So, we got Savannah Curry. So there are a lot of players that we're going to be counting on. And I think that total picture of Temple women's basketball will be what we're looking for.
You mentioned that total picture, and I think Tierra East plays a big role in that, just as your leading scorer and your primary just everything for you guys. And she was kind of struggling a bit through conference play, but really closed the end of the season out well. What does that kind of mean? Just having one of your best players, like obviously in rhythm as you approach the tournament.
Yeah, she is a great competitor. And we saw that, we see it time and time again, but even in the Charlotte game, she stepped up. She is such a competitor that if she has to do whatever she needs to do for us to win, we can count on that from T.
Kind of just also following up off of that, obviously you're not looking too far ahead, a potential matchup against the two better teams in the, conference against North Texas and UTSA, but kind of taking us back to that stretch that you guys were struggling. That was a part of your losing streak against those, and you were up against them at both points in that game. What have you kind of learned from that 3-game losing streak where things aren't necessarily clicking and you have leads, but you can't necessarily maintain them? What did that kind of just, prepare you as you approach the tournament?
Yeah, well, as a coach, you try to look at everything and I take that stuff personally where was I good in the lineups? Was I good in the play calling? Were we good in our defense? And taking a look at those things, I want to, pick up on where we think we need to sub so that we get the best out of our players. And just looking at that, I think we've made some adjustments and I think it's going to be well for us this time.
I wanted to ask you about the rebounding because I remember after the USF game, you talked a lot about how the rebounding needed to be better, and that was the reason you guys lost that game, why you guys were going through your struggles. And kind of since that moment, you guys have completely not only turned around rebounding, but this winning streak as well. Obviously, getting the hot hand going down into the tournament. How big of a factor has been the turnaround in rebounding, and how much is having that hot hand going to be helpful, like with the double bye, and also just making sure you maintain that momentum?
Yeah, I think it's helped us a lot. And I've got to give credit to my staff who, when we find out what we need work on, they go right at it. And it's been a great effort from our staff in working on rebounding. And we've seen that, increase. And we've seen how we've taken more control of the rebounding game.
Diane, you I think shared this story before about getting a program to the NCAA tournament. There's nothing like it. I think you shared that anecdote. I think the AD down at Towson came up to you and said like I had to reschedule my vacation or something along those lines. And like
Yeah.
that feeling, I know people talk about it and it might sound like cheesy and cliche, but there's nothing like it. That's obviously where you guys want to get to. Do the players ask you about what it's like, what the anticipation is like, or are they, we've talked about already, are they sort of like so process oriented where they're like, we know it's there, we know we're capable of it, but we can't look that far ahead?
Well, funny you should mention that, John, because I just came from the training room post practice
Mm,
and all of our players were in there getting their treatment and they started asking me, Coach, we're excited. What
mhm,
is it like
mm.
to go to the NCAA tournament? And, I was telling them a little bit about it and they are so excited. They're like, yay, we can't wait. So that gives me a good feeling knowing that that's what they're striving to do.
Diane, recently Temple announced that they were going to opt into revenue sharing, which I'm sure is gonna help everybody. That was expected, but nonetheless, what was your reaction when you saw that news?
Very happy that we're opting in. It'll give us more resources, especially in operations, but it'll give us resources in that NIL space where we have not been. And hopefully that will help us in recruiting to get some top players because we'll have some more resources.
Has Arthur Johnson, the athletic director, talked to you yet about what your budget is going to be like? Because the season, depending on how it goes, could be, I mean, in a few weeks, the portal is going to be opening up and things are going to happen quickly. Has he talked to you yet about what you guys are going to have?
No, we have not heard anything official from the administration about that. So we're just sitting, and waiting and hoping. And I'm sure that it'll be something significant because we're opting in and that gives us more resources.
Yeah. Do you almost kind of have to go to him and say, "Hey, I'm going to need to know what we have sooner rather than later," because you know how it goes. Like you
Yeah.
have players on your team that are attractive to other teams, and we'd like to think in a perfect world that there's no tampering that goes on, but there's tampering that goes on. Like, do you kind of almost have to go to him and say, "Hey, I'm going to have to know sooner rather than later what we're working with"?
Well, not to pressure on the administration because they've got to work their deals. But what we have done is we've been reaching out to some of our donors so that they can help us in the meantime because the portal is opening very quickly. And if we could do something now to be ready for the portal with our donors donating to our NIL fund that would help us.
I don't think we maybe haven't done, I don't know if we've done the scoop since your daughter won a WNBA championship and was the WNBA Finals MVP. It doesn't get much better than that, right? And you've shared so
Right.
many stories about her keeping you and your husband up in the morning, like shooting, and you hearing her just outside on the driveway. Obviously, it had to be pretty insane, but what's it like to just take that all in? I think you were at every single one of her games. I remember texting with you. You're going on the road, you're going to New York. What was it like to just take that all in?
It was great. And, it's a great feeling knowing how much she worked and how hard she worked. And she had been to the finals 3 times before
Mhm.
and didn't win. But for her to win this time and to be named the MVP was a great feeling. It was great to be there. It was great to be on the floor with her as she accepted her MVP trophy as well.
Does she get to be around your players at all and talk to them about what? I mean, she's at the pinnacle of her profession, and athletes talk a lot about everything that comes with that. Like you reach the mountaintop, and it's like, how do I stay there? How do I not get complacent? And like, there's so much that goes into that. There's always like, I've done this. What's next? Does she ever get to be around your players and talk about what it's like to reach that type of level?
Yeah, she has when she's in town and for the last few years, well, all of her career, she's had to go play overseas for the money.
Hmm.
And she's overseas again right now. And so when she's here, but oftentimes she's working.
What makes her great? I mean, I know she can play the game, but you don't just get there on talent alone. She's at the level that everybody wants to get at, and she's one of the best players in the world. What makes her great?
Just her work ethic. She, when she was younger, I would say I've coached all of these players and they're pros, and you're not putting in the effort. And so, in order to do that, you've got to do this. And she would every single thing I threw at her, she would do it and more. And so her work ethic has gotten her where she is today, not just the talent, but everything she's putting into it. And that goes to say for every student athlete, like you're never the best you can be. There's always more, but you've got to give more to get more. And
Yeah.
she's done that.
A last WNBA question for you here before there's a mailbag question from one of our listeners. They have a question for you, but obviously there's been some talk about Philly getting a WNBA team. I feel like from the outside looking in, the appreciation of women's basketball is maybe as there's still more to be done, but it's the appetite for women's basketball is maybe as good as it's ever been. What would having a WNBA franchise in Philadelphia mean for the city and this fan base, do you think?
I think it would be great. And, I've talked to a couple people that are part of the bidding process, and it is important. They're really into it. I would love to have a team here. We're a sports team. I mean, a sports town, and I think it would be well received here. And Philadelphia has a lot of players that have come from this area as well that would love to be a part of that as well. So I'm hoping for it. So you all get ready. Hopefully we can get one.
The mailbag question here, this comes from a screen name on our basketball message board. The screen name is Berkshire Owl. And the question is for Coach Rich, who has been the most surprising player this year?
I would say probably T-Mac. I
Mhm.
mean, she has really worked on her shot, and her shot is like money right now. And, to see her even get even more deadly with that shot is surprising.
Diane, what do you do to in the moments between practice and the games? You don't get to this point without being confident, but what do you listen to? What do you eat? What do you do to kind of keep yourself even keeled between games, between practices? Because this is, I would imagine for a coach and a player, March is as exciting as it gets. What do you do to balance yourself out? Do you take walks? Do you work out? Do you listen to music? What do you do to kind of stay even keeled?
Well, I do watch a lot of film, but I have been working out lately, and just to try to, get the anxiety down a little bit. But I do watch a lot of film, and that's kind of like my life during the season is trying to get better, trying to be a better coach, trying to teach better, trying to learn more about this game. But lately, I have, gotten on my Peloton a couple times. I did shoot up some baskets at our shoot around the other day at Charlotte, and my team was surprised how many buckets I was making. So
I got to shoot around a little bit in the Leah Core Center before the Woj and Kevin Gandhi event last week, and Chris Clark told me I had good form from the foul line. But I'm also 48 years old and nobody was guarding me, so there,
well, cool.
there was that.
Me and Johnny are in a basketball game, right? 1v1. Who do you think, has the edge here? I think personally
No,
I'm a lot faster than Johnny. And I think I have a better jump shot, but just optics, just personalities. Like, who do you think,
I,
just
I
initial
think
thoughts?
I think Johnny would use his strength on you, Jason. I think you're
absolutely.
quick. You're probably better from the perimeter, but don't try to go down low with
If,
Johnny.
if he goes down low, it's over. He
Yes.
knows that. He knows that. He's experienced it firsthand. He knows.
Next time me and Johnny play 1v1, you will be the first person to receive the film, coach, because it needs to be shown that I can guard Johnny.
Okay. All right.
Johnny, how much did you need this reaffirmation from one of the best college coaches in the country, considering the level of ribbing that you take on this podcast?
I think you hit it right on the nail, John. I've taken a lot of criticism on this podcast from the rest of you, and think to hear that from Coach Rich, someone who knows the game, like is a great coach. I think it really just boosted my confidence, and with the WHIP TTN game coming up, I'm ready to go absolutely dominate TTN. WHIPs can absolutely destroy them.
Diane,
Uh-oh.
before I let you go, now you just heard what Johnny said. Is he all of a sudden now getting a little too confident? Do you need to kind of rein him
This
back in
is-
a little bit?
There's no such thing as too much
I
confidence.
know that goes against what you say. So, well, Diane, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it. Best of luck to you. This crew is going to be covering you down in Fort Worth. So, best of luck to you, and we're looking forward to catching up with you when you get back.
Oh, thanks, you guys. Thanks. Go Owls.
Big thank you to Diane Richardson for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk to her. So, big week of basketball ahead for the Owls, courtesy of the double bye. They'll either be playing Tulsa, who's the fifth seed, and they're awaiting FAU and Charlotte. So, not a surefire matchup either way, even though FAU is the 13th seed. Like Diane said, all those teams present a little bit of a tricky matchup, but she feels like they're playing good basketball heading in. Thought the rev share piece was interesting. I'm hoping for her sake that she has that rev share conversation with Arthur Johnson sooner rather than later. They need to know what their budget is going to be because the portal opens up soon and the season, depending on how it goes, could be over not far away. So good that Temple is opting in. We've been talking for weeks on this podcast about how they would. Hope for her sake, for Adam Fisher's sake, that they get some more clarity on that because it just helps them to do their jobs better. As this team prepares to head down to Fort Worth, we've talked about this before. They have shown that they're capable of competing with anybody in the league. They're the fourth seed heading down. As Jay asked Diana, they were leading UTSA. They were leading North Texas. USF has given them problems. If they see USF, it'll be in the championship game. They're on the other side of the bracket. But next week after, and we're talking about this team having won the American Athletic Conference tournament and going to the NCAA tournament it's because of blank. What is it going to take for them to win this tournament? We think they have the talent to do it. Like I just said, they've shown that they can compete with anybody. But if I'm sitting here and saying a week from now they won because of blank, what is it?
Think I'm gonna go a little bit different here. I'm gonna say it's because of their rebounding. I asked Coach Richardson right before we ended the interview about how big of a difference rebounding has made for them since that USF loss, where she said flat out like they need to be better if they want to win, if they want to have any success, they need to be better at rebounding. And since then, like they look completely different down low in the paint. They're getting offensive rebounds and the defensive rebounds too. The offensive rebounds are huge because they're extending possessions, but the defensive rebounds are even bigger because of the way that they play in transition and they get a quick rebound and they go. If they're able to rebound well and extend possessions and also play in transition off the rebounds really well, I think that's how we're sitting here 2 weeks from now saying, this team did so great at rebounding that they were able to come out on top.
I'm gonna go with their depth and everybody stepping up and playing their role. I think they've kind of been at their best along with the rebounding when Kayla Turner and Julissa Molina are really, really clicking on all cylinders. We've seen Julissa Molina have points in this season where she's putting up double doubles, and Kale Turner's putting up 20 plus points and kind of spelling Tarriyonna Gary and Tiare East when they are struggling, and then add in Anissa Rivera off the bench with her physicality and her toughness, and then Savannah Curry and Felicia Jacobs doing their role as well. If the depth really plays into their roles and really kind of helps spell Tarriyonna Gary and Tiare East if they don't play well, then I think we can see this team really have a lot of success.
Yeah, I think both good points. I'm more interested in their half court offense. I think this is a team that loves to play in speed and loves to, push tempo. But I think where they struggle is when they're forced to slow down teams. You set like a full court press and they can't get their offense fully down the court. So they're in the half court set. They appear to struggle a bit. So I think like it'd be interesting to see what type of plays they draw to get their top weapons opener, whether it's a Tarriyonna Gary or a Tiare East, and what that looks like in terms of creating the offense in the half court set.
All right, so stick with us for coverage of both the women's team and the men's team down in Fort Worth. The women will await either Tulsa, Charlotte, or FAU in the quarterfinals on Monday in Fort Worth. Speaking of Adam Fisher's men's team, they're back on the right side of the ledger here. They've won their last two games. They still have not been a healthy team. Jamal Mashburn Jr. still remains out with that toe injury, but two wins to speak of. They hit the buzzer beater. They beat USF 73-71 last Wednesday with the help of course, Zion Stanford following his own miss, got the shot blocked, put in the shot at the buzzer. So they beat USF 73-71. And then on Tuesday this week, an 81-77 win over Tulsa. They get Quante Berry back. They get Steve Settle back. No Shane Dezzoni, stayed home. He was sick all weekend, and the team held him back in Philadelphia. So one regular season game left. They are 16-14 overall, 8-9 in conference play. If they can upset North Texas on Sunday, that is a 2 p.m. start on ESPN Plus, but senior day at the Liacouras Center. Obviously a very good North Texas team, one of the best in the conference. They're 22-6 overall, 13-3 in conference play, and they are also winners of their last six. Four of their six losses have come on the road, but Temple's hoping to knock them off. I'd be mildly surprised if Jamal Mashburn Jr. plays in that game as well. But again, Quante Berry back, Steve Settle back. We'll see how Shane Dezzoni is feeling. But guys, what did you think of the win on Tuesday, 81-77? A lot of storylines there, but Aiden Tobiasen stepping up for them, getting the game tying free throws, and then the game winner shot fakes, gets in for a layup, and they're able to hold on. Obviously, the odds are stacked against them here to win the conference tournament, although they've shown they can beat Memphis. But that was also with Jamal Mashburn Jr. on the floor. His status for the conference tournament up in the air at this point. But what'd you think of what you saw on Tuesday? Obviously, any win at this juncture of the season is a good thing, but what did you see that would be encouraging for them, and what do you see that still is concerning, I should say?
I think that it's good that they're getting relatively healthy. Like I know Shinazoni was sick, but like he'll obviously be back. I think it is very still worrisome that Jamal is still out, and we don't know if he'll be back because this team is a lot different with and without him. But just based on the last two games that they played, I think it's good that they're getting back to that just finding a way to win scenario. I mean, they've played close games all season long. Obviously, when they went on that long losing streak, they weren't really clicking. Obviously, Jamal Mashburn has been a big part of that. But I think it's like you hit on the nail on the head, John. Aiden Tobiasen has really come out into his own since Jamal Mashburn has gone out. And I think he is a very key factor for when they go down in Fort Worth, where his defensive ability, his ability to shoot the ball, and his poise that he has. You wouldn't expect him to be a true freshman on that shot fake and layup that you mentioned, John. I mean, that's stuff you don't really see from true freshmen a lot anymore. You like the way he's able to stay composed in that scenario. I think it's good that they got Steve Settle back. I think Babatunde Duradola has been pretty good in the time in this 2-game stretch. Like I think there are things that are starting to come together from the losing streak that they had, but I do think that there are still worrisome things. Like I don't know how well Conte Berry is going to look. Obviously, he still had his fingers taped together, so not really sure how he's getting acclimated back to play with his finger maybe still a little bit injured. But I think that there are aspects that you can look forward to as a head down to Texas. And when they play North Texas this Sunday. But I think it all kind of hinders on the fact of Jamal Mashburn's health and if he's going to be able to be ready to play down in Texas.
I think something else that I think is kind of something good to look at with these injuries. Obviously, you never want to have injuries to anybody on a team, but they just kind of opened the door for Dylan Batiste and Matteo Picarelli to find their way back into the rotation. And I feel like as conference tournaments start and as March comes near, I feel like rotations tend to shrink with coaches and teams as they kind of look to play their best guys for the best chance to win. But we're seeing Matteo Picarelli and Dylan Batiste kind of step back into the rotation, and they're making the most of the opportunities. We saw Matteo Picarelli step in and have 11 points against South Florida, and then have 8 more points against Tulsa. And Dylan Batiste, who was really, really out of the rotation for a long time in the middle part of that season and early part of conference play, has played significant minutes in these last 2 games. And they can both kind of provide another option off the bench, especially I think Dylan Batiste down low, where their depth has kind of been tested at times. And even Matteo Picarelli with the backcourt with injuries and players not playing anymore. I think it's important to kind of see those guys reemerge as options off the bench.
Yeah, I think like that was the point that I was going to make, but also I'm still a bit worried about this team's defense. I think that has been the biggest issue this season, and I don't think there's necessarily anything that they can bring in. Or like Dylan Batiste brings a big impact for them off the bench, but I think he's a bit undersized matching up against bigger forwards, and you can see that where it's like that's where they score in bunches against Temple. So I'd be a bit worried about what that defense looks like, especially going to conference play when they're consistently. That's the reason that's holding them back from winning games at times.
We get asked about Dylan Batiste a lot, and I think that sometimes people forget he's a freshman and the developmental piece of things. I don't want to say it goes out the window in the era of now revenue sharing in the portal, but again, I get it. We talked on this show about how he can impact this program. He's a great athlete. It's fun that he's a legacy recruit. He's the son of Derek Batiste, who I covered back in the 90s, but he's just gotten steadily better. And I think when he's not out on the floor, people are like, what's going on? How come he's not getting minutes? And he's just gotten a little better. And progression can be a wonderful thing. And maybe it's happening for them at the right time. I agree with you, Jay. I mean, he's 6'8". He's a great athlete, but he's still a little undersized compared to some of the bigger guys in the conference. But a small bright spot for them. I shouldn't say a small bright spot, but a bright spot for them moving forward. But on Sunday, again, the regular season finale against a really tough North Texas team that's allowing less than 60 points a game. They have been at the opposite end of things when you talk about defense. Temple has not been a good defensive basketball team this year. North Texas has. They've got some guys that can obviously put the ball in the basket, Aiton Wright, Brendan Lorient. So big test for Temple. And in terms of seeding, again, we're recording this on Thursday afternoon. A lot will be clearer by the time the end of the weekend comes around, but Temple could. I was responding to Mark Leventhal on the Temple men's basketball Facebook group about tiebreaker scenarios. So if Temple were to upset North Texas, finish 9-9 in the conference standings, and if Wichita State, he'd asked me about like a 3-team tie. If it's Temple, Wichita State, and ECU all end up at 9-9 in the conference standings, there's all these different tiebreaker scenarios. In a 3-team tie, Wichita State would be the 6th seed, Temple would be the 7th seed, ECU would be the 8th seed, because they get looked at as like a mini conference at that point. The league has its own tiebreaker scenarios. So things are still kind of very much up in the air at that point. Obviously, Temple has to take care of business on Sunday and beat North Texas, a game that they're not going to be favored in because UNT is a very good basketball team. So a lot ahead there. We'll have coverage of Sunday's game for you. I'll be there. We've got some more basketball to talk about in the mailbag. Before we get to that, just a quick football update here. Again, spring ball starts next Tuesday. We're going to get a lot of access to spring practice. And so we'll have a lot to talk about. Stay tuned for our spring football coverage. Right there, it's right upon us. A new coach, new era, Casey Keeler. Practices start Tuesday. We have a roster update to pass along. If you are an owlscoop.com subscriber, check out our football message board. A player that had previously been in the portal has decided to come back, someone who should help on the offensive side of the ball. So again, if you're not a subscriber to owlscoop.com, now's a good time to hop on, especially with spring ball coming up. So we'll talk about plenty in the coming weeks. We'll get access to Casey Keeler, the assistant coaches, several players, We'll be able to give you our observations of what we see. Again, we'll say this throughout. A lot of roster moves to come after spring ball. It's a different time, a different era, but we'll be able to, just give you a sense of like who's running with the first team offense, second team offense, third team offense, what the special teams look like. So really excited to bring you that coverage as well. As we tell you each week, Mike Greenspan of Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers is the best injury lawyer you could hope to have, but he wants to keep you safe on the road and in life. Shares some wisdom each week and is passing along more gems for you this week. So you'll hear from Mike Greenspan of Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers, and then we'll hop over to the mailbag.
Tax season is upon us again, and with it come the attack of the tax fraudsters. That's right. There are people out there who will take your social security number and file a tax return hoping to get a refund with your information. How can you prevent this from happening? Well, there's a way, and it's absolutely free. Go on the IRS website, irs.gov, and get a tax IP. An identity protection PIN, or an IP PIN, is a 6-digit number that only you and the IRS knows. And that'll make sure, if you have it, that a tax return that is filed on your behalf is legitimate. It's ridiculous that we have to deal with this these days, but protect yourself. It's free, it's easy, go do it, and don't let them take your hard-earned money.
Let's jump into the mailbag here. A couple of questions to lead us off from our friend Harry Mays. First question here, Harry has two. Previous post about Temple Hard Knocks may result in a good discussion, ? So, yeah, ESPN's deal with North Carolina for Hard Knocks fell through, so ESPN is delving into Hard Knocks for college football. I'm not trying to knock down Temple a couple of pegs. I would be utterly shocked if ESPN picks Temple for its Hard Knocks programming. But let me ask you guys this. ESPN approaches Temple's administration and says, hey, we want to bring Hard Knocks to North Broad Street, to 10th and Diamond Streets. Do you say, yes, we'll go for it? Or do you say, no, we think it's too much of a distraction? I know what my answer would be, but Jay, I'll start with you and we'll go around the horn here.
I think it'd be pretty cool. I get the distraction part of things, but I think like in terms of like bringing an audience to your school and like bringing attention, I think that's what I'd be more, happy about opposed to looking at it as a distraction. At the end of the day, it's bringing an audience to Temple, and you're in turn getting a lot of just potential enrollment as well, just from the eyes that could bring it as well.
I'm going to kind of disagree with Jay a little bit here on this front. I think the distractions might be a little too much, especially for college kids in an era of social media where everything gets put online and so much is kind of based around your online image. It could be turned into certain players trying to brand themselves online through this Hard Knocks as opposed to focusing on day in and day out on the football field, getting better and doing what's best for the program. I think it could turn into distractions within players trying to, show their best online selves rather than trying to kind of put their best selves on the football field. And I just think with college kids, I mean, personally, me being a college kid, I think I would be beyond distracted with cameras like following me around and myself being on TV. I know like I'm young, I'm not the smartest person in the world. Nobody kind of is at this age. So I think kind of having cameras around will lead to distractions and everything will not be football focused. So for that reason, I think I would probably go against it.
I think you're probably right, Colin, which is the probable reason that Temple, if they were approached with this, would think about saying no. I think about this from the perspective of you are a college football program that has struggled with attendance in a city that is mainly focused on professional sports. ESPN gives you the opportunity to show people in Philadelphia and the rest of the country that like Temple is here too. And if it's entertaining, if people can attach to it, attendance will go up. And if attendance goes up, then, everything else goes up after that. So I think that there are other aspects outside of just football that are beneficial of Temple doing this, where like, yes, maybe it could be a distraction, but I also think like it could help you the school, the program outside of just on the field stuff. So I think that's why like if I were the athletic director or whoever makes that decision, if it's John Fry, I don't know, but like I would probably lean towards yes, just because of there's so many stuff off the field and in like the the program and attendance wise that I think it would help, even if it maybe hurts distraction wise.
Yeah, I think there's literally no reason to say no to them. Again, do I think do I think that this is going to happen? No, I don't. But for all the reasons that you guys have discussed, it brings a ton of visibility to a program that needs it. This is what production meetings are for. This is where a seasoned PR guy like Rich Berg, preps the team, does media training, and says, "Hey, listen, they're going to look to try to get sound bites. They're going to look for this, look for that. You guys need to just be buttoned up, have some fun." I don't think that ESPN would necessarily, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of the network. I don't know that they would approach Hard Knocks in a college program like they would in getting like an oops moment, like the Giants fumbling their future away with Saquon Barkley. How about our Philadelphia Eagles being busy this week, by the way, extending some players, re-signing some players. But nonetheless, yeah, I think this is what media training is for, and this is what prep work is for. It would obviously it would create a little bit of that, like, wow, they're going to Temple. Why are they going down to Temple? And I see no negatives about it. Yes, it could be a distraction, but it's why you do stuff like this. You say, okay, this could potentially be a distraction. This is how you answer this question. This could potentially be a distraction. This is how you handle yourself coming off the field or doing this. Not that those things aren't legitimate worries, but they would stand so much to gain and very little to lose from it. So we'll see. Stranger things have happened. Doubt it would happen, but like the question. Actually, two more from Harry here. Love to hear some discussion about Adam Fisher's staff and the potential need for an addition of an old, salty, experienced hand. Not saying anybody needs to be let go, just an addition. It's not the first time. I think it was last week or the week before we asked about any potential staff changes. I doubt that you would see any changes to the three bench roles of Michael Huger, his associate head coach, who Adam worked with back under Jim Larinaga at Miami, or Chris Clark, or Bobby Jordan. We'll see what happens with, just because Lynn Greer the third is gone doesn't mean that Lynn Greer the second will be gone. Lynn Greer the second was here in an off-bench role before his son came to Temple. Maybe if Lynn doesn't come back, maybe that opens up another role. Like, again, more guys can be working with the team. I think Adam's been impressed with what he's seen from a guy like Khalif Wyatt, from other guys on the staff like Andrew Ortelli. But it's an interesting question. Do you bring in a guy who is a defensive consultant? And not to say that Michael Huger doesn't have that knowledge, not to say that Chris Clark doesn't have that knowledge, not to say that Bobby Jordan doesn't have that knowledge, but and again, we've said this before, they could be looking at a vastly different roster depending on who they can keep, who they bring in. But it's an interesting question. I don't know who that person would be, but I don't think it could hurt them because, again, like their single biggest flaw has been, well, it's two things: staying healthy and would be maybe number one, and 1A would be just defensive lapses and being much better at that end of the floor. We'll see what personnel they have to work with. But interesting question. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Lynn Greer goes and you bring in somebody else, but that to maximize that, you would want that person to be on the floor. So interesting question from Harry. Third and final one from Harry. Also, what does Temple's opt-in to the house settlement mean for the athletics program? Like I said earlier, we've been talking for weeks and weeks about how Temple was expected to opt in. The announcement was news, but the actual foundation of it was not news. This was always going to be what they were going to do. It means to me, Harry, that they're doing what they were expected to do. And I don't mean this, I mean this in just the most fair way possible. If the athletic director, Arthur Johnson, is going to say, we want to win championships, we want to win championships, we want to win championships. He said that on ESPN as they were, it wasn't his fault, but the timing of that touchdown that they were giving up, he said, we want to win championships. That's great. How do you win championships? You have to keep up with your peers. I'm not expecting Temple to keep up with the Texas A&Ms and the Florida States and the Penn States and the Notre Dames and Ohio States of the world. We know that that's not realistic for a college team in a pro sports city. But if you really are serious about winning championships, the championship that you can control is winning a conference championship, then opting in is a no-brainer. So it means that they're doing what they're taking a step. To me, it means that they are taking a step towards saying what they want to do, which is to win championships. I would be shocked if Arthur Johnson talks about how much each program is going to get. I think it's tad concerning that he hasn't talked to his women's basketball coach. And go out on a limb and say that he hasn't talked to his men's basketball coach about what their budgets are going to be. Because again, if you want to set them up for success, again, just trying to be fair here, just shooting it straight, they need to know what their budget is and what they're working with, because there is no question that programs are going to come after Zion Stanford. They're going to come after Aiden Tobias, and they're going to come after Quante Berry. Diane's going to have to do the same thing on her end. So to me, Harry, it means that it's one step in an expected step that they should have been taking. And I don't say that lightly, because athletic department budgets are what they are, enrollment challenges are what they are. But if the expectation is that you're going to win championships, then you must opt in. How they opt in, what their plan is, unknown at this point. But I think the coaches themselves, the architects of these rosters, would want to know what that means more than anybody else. A few more questions to get to here. Screen name Cool Hand Red. This is a men's basketball question. With the rash of recent injuries to veteran players, Adam Fisher has called upon the true freshmen, Aiden Tobias and Babatunde Duradola, and lately Dylan Battie, to fill the gaps in the lineup rotations. If I were going to grade their efforts, I feel Tobiasen gets an A, Duradola gets a B, and Battie a B+. They have stepped up and shown great hustle, energy, talent, and athleticism. Your thoughts? So we are asked to hand out report cards here. Colin, I'll start with you. So Cool Hand Red gives Aiden Tobiasen an A, gives Babatunde Duradola a B, and Dylan Battie a B+. What grades would you give these guys?
I definitely agree that Aiden Tobiasen gets an A. Like he has shown, I mean, throughout on nearly the entire year. I mean, he's been a starter as a true freshman and has really stepped up, especially as injuries have mounted in these past couple of weeks with Jamal Mashburn Jr., Quante Berry, Shane Dezzoni, all at kind of different points. He's kind of been relied on more and has really not shown any fear when he's being asked to take more shots. And he has shown that he is a very capable shot maker on top of being on a team that has really kind of struggled defensively this year, being a really good defender and being someone who has said he enjoys playing defense and enjoys being on that side of the ball. So I mean, I agree that he for sure gets an A. I would say I think I agree with all three grades, honestly. Babatunde Duradola has started since game one, and as a true freshman has been an anchor down low, has struggled with foul trouble, which maybe knocks his grade down a little bit here and there in games, but it's shown that he's a rebounding presence down low, and most importantly, it's just a body down low, which is what they need. And Dylan Battie these last two games has been an important guy who has stepped up again when Steve Settle was out, and now just kind of getting more minutes and has shown the athleticism, which is what we kind of touched on earlier, which he was harped for when he was brought in. And I mean, Coach Fisher said after the South Florida game when he kind of got that extended look that he had his best four practices leading up to that game, which is what kind of got him into the rotation again. I think and he said that practice kind of leads into what you see in games. And as Batiste practices better, we're going to keep seeing him on the floor, and I guess we're seeing what he's been showing in practice recently, which is the athleticism and the ability to grab some rebounds, get some putbacks. So I mean, I think I agree with all three grades. I maybe bump Babatunde Duradola up to a B plus as well, but I think those are all fair grades.
Jay, what do you think? And then we'll close things out with you, Johnny, before I give my grades.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Colin. The only thing I would change, and I think you said it at the end, is bumping Babatunde Dordola up to an A. I think you coming in as a freshman and playing and starting nearly every game or every game for Temple. I think that like to me like says a lot. And you mentioned the foul trouble that has been an issue, but I still would say that regardless, he's been consistent. He's been on the court. He's made an impact for Temple in each game and been one of their better players and more consistent players all season. So I think I'd bump him up to an A, but everything else I'd keep the same.
Johnny, here's your chance to be my teaching assistant here and grade and do some grading as Colin and Jay have done. What are your grades here for this crew freshman?
If we're grading this off of just like talent and what we've seen, like I probably agree with most of these. If we're going off of like what the expectations were and how they've kind of outperformed them, I would say Tobiasen gets an A plus because originally people thought he might redshirt, and now he's coming in and playing. He's starting almost every game this season. He originally was in there just as a rebounder slash defender. Since Jamal Mashburn's gone out, he's stepped up into this role of shot making and being dependent on both ends of the floor. And I think the effort he puts in on both ends, I think, is a reason that I would give him an A plus. in my mind. Duradola, I think he has been more integral, and I think a B doesn't really reflect how important he's been for this team. Like, so I agree with Jay and Colin. I would bump him up to, I would probably say B plus. I think the foul trouble, and the early parts of the early struggles in the season maybe don't get him to an A. And as much as I think that the growth we've seen from Petit has been great, I don't know if I'd give him a B plus just because we haven't seen it on that big of a scale. We haven't seen him like the early parts in the year. He played a couple games and he didn't really play for a long stretch of time, which tells me that maybe in practice he wasn't performing the way that they wanted him to, or he was struggling in certain areas. But obviously, recently he's been really crucial for them with injuries. Obviously, when Steve Settle went down, he got with a sickness. He got his first start of the season of his college career. But I would say he's probably at a B to B minus for me. Not because of anything he's done, but purely just because we haven't really seen as much from him as we have from Tobias and Duradola.
I don't take any pride in this. I've been told by some of my students that I could be a tough grader. I don't try to be a tough grader. I try to be a fair grader. My grades here are B pluses for Babatunde Duradola and Aiden Tobias, and a B for Dylan Battie. I think the only way I'm giving out A's here is if these guys are first team all conference players. Not to say that they don't have the ability or the chance to do that in the future, but I think all three of these guys have been good in their own right. I'm gonna start with Baba. I don't get sometimes I'm talking about a small segment of the fan base here. I think there are people here that need some perspective in terms of what has been asked of this young man. He's not the first by any sense of the imagination to reclassify. That happens very frequently, but Baba reclassed in August. In a matter of a couple of weeks, he comes to Temple's campus and impressed right away. And whether you're a guard, forward, wing player, whatever, everybody has that level of adjustment. A lot was asked of this guy from the jump. And I guess he's their third leading rebounder, right? So it goes from, Steve has been their leading rebounder at 6.2 rebounds per game. He's their fourth leading rebounders, but he has started all 30 games to this point, 4.8 points per game, but he's continued to grow. I think, yes, sometimes, of course, he's been in foul trouble, but a lot has been asked of this kid. And as I think the year has gone on, as the season has gone on, you don't really see him out of position too much. Whereas sometimes you see some clumsy play from Elijah Gray where he's just playing some crash ball and driving in. I don't have a problem with Elijah Gray trying to be multifaceted. He can hit a three occasionally, hit a big three from the top of the key that helped them win the other night at Tulsa. He can go down low. Obviously, he was hurt to start the year, but a lot has been asked of Babatunde Duradola. He is the closest thing they have to a post-up big, and they've asked him to rebound. They've asked him to be on the floor. I think he has had more on his shoulders than the other two guys in this group. I would give him a B plus. I would also give Aiden Tobias a B plus. I think that he has really grown into his role. Another guy in his own right who has grown quickly. We've talked several times in the past about how, heading into the summer before his senior year, was getting D2 offers before his recruitment really picked up. You get a sense now of how good he can be. I mean, he's every bit of 6'5". He's rangy. He defends. He's fearless. Johnny, I think you make a good point. It was never decided that he was going to redshirt, but I think if they had their druthers, and if Jameel Brown was going to play the whole year, if Linger the third was going to play the whole year, if Shane Dezzoni was going to be able to stay healthy, if Jamal Mashburn Jr. was going to be able to stay healthy, then maybe you could get away with redshirting Aiden Tobias, but the ability is there. He's been a willing defender, hasn't forced his shot. If anything, they've told him, like, hey, pull the trigger when you need to. Look at what happens down at Tulsa. Not much of a factor offensively, but when it counted, hit a couple foul shots to tie the game. Then later on, shot fake, gets to the rim, scores. I'd give Aiden a B plus. I think he's been as good as you could hope for him to be. I give Dylan a B. And on the flip side of it, where I think he is the favorite underdog, where people want him to come in. He's a legacy recruit. Why isn't he playing? Why isn't he playing? Why isn't he playing? It's just taken him a little bit more time. That's all. I think it's taken him a little bit more time to pick things up. No different than a Khalif Wyatt, no different than a Ramon Moore, no different than a Luis Guzman, some other Temple freshmen of different eras. I think people just tend to forget that it takes a little bit more time. and I think he's got a bright future ahead of him too. But I think if I had to give a slight edge, if I were giving a B plus, I think Babatunde Dorodola is like an 89.8 for me, and Aiden Tobiason's at like an 89. I think Baba, I think, has really been one of the more unsung heroes of this team because a lot, literally and figuratively, has been put on his shoulders. So I like that question there. Couple more here. Jack Orlando on Twitter. Do you think it would be wise to lean more toward basketball than football, or at least equal for rev share? We will never be able to compete with lower power teams in football with the pay, but we might be able to have a competitive advantage or a comparative advantage for basketball if we focus on that. I get where you're coming from, Jack. I just don't think that formulaically that's how a lot of programs are approaching it. You have more players in a football program, and you have to dedicate more rev share dollars to football. So to say it will be equal, you would be the only way the only way Temple let's say Temple's going to throw 3 million in rev share at football, and you wanted to throw 3 million at rev share for basketball. Several people who I've talked to both in Philly and around the country have said that George Mason might be able to come in at 3 million in rev share for basketball. I don't expect Temple to be at that level, but if you were going to be equal, it would have to be a situation where you're bringing up the rear from basketball and not taking away from football. If you're taking away from football, and I know the basketball people don't want to hear that, I'm not saying that basketball is not worthy of it, but I think the conversation that you're having here, Jack, puts you more toward if you're saying we're never going to be able to compete in football, then you're in the conversation of, I know this isn't what you're saying, but if it gets to that point when you say Temple's never going to be able to compete in football, forget Penn State, forget LSU and Alabama. If down the line you're saying, well, Temple can't compete with SMU and Tulane and Cincinnati, that's when sometimes people say, what are we doing with football? Go all in on basketball. Charters, private jets, 5 million a year in rev share. That's where I think you're leaning more toward without saying it. I'm not saying that you're saying cut football, but I don't know that an equal share works just because that's the pure number of players in the program. You guys have any thoughts on this one? If let's say you're in a high leadership position here, you're the new athletic director at Temple. If you had a pot of money, how would you shift it around here?
I don't think it's fair to say like Temple's never going to compete because less than 10 years ago, like they were competing and they did win a conference championship. So like they can compete. I mean, like sure, you're not going to compete with Alabama and you're not going to compete with LSU. You're not going to do be at that level, but it just depends on like where with Jack's question, like what does he consider competing? Does he consider competing for American Athletic Conference championships? Because then I think it's completely fair to say yes, like with rev sharing, like and with the right coaching staff, with the correct recruiting and like the correct systems in place, Temple can absolutely compete for conference championships now with revenue sharing. But if you're saying you want to go and win a national championship and be in the college football playoffs every year and do like yeah, like sure you're probably not going to be able to do that like you said, John. But I mean obviously like I think Temple is a basketball school historically. I think basketball is an important part of Temple's history and I see Jack's point where maybe going more in or equal with football on basketball could be helpful in getting Temple basketball back to Final Four appearances or just making the NCAA tournament multiple years in a row. Like I could see that. But I think to your point, John, there's too many people in football. There's the way everything breaks down. It's not really realistic to have Temple have the same or more than football. Like I think they're like if you do it percentage wise, like maybe it could be equal if you break down the per person and like stuff like that. But I just don't think that when it comes to total dollar amounts, it makes sense for basketball to go and have more money than football.
Jay, do you want to
Exactly.
read Nirbanu's question here to close us out?
Yeah, I'll read her question. So, Nirvana Sahin said on Twitter, Temple opted into rev sharing this past week. Do you guys think we will be able to catch up to other schools when it comes to supporting athletes?
Catch up to the blue bloods of the world? No. And I don't say that to be a doomsday person. I say that to just be realistic, but you need to catch up to your peers. And again, this is where I would want to see, again, in the interest of just being fair, this is where I would want to see a strategic plan with clear, measurable goals and outcomes about what your goals are. Arthur has said we want to win championships. That's great. You should want to win championships. How do you win championships? What are your measurable and strategic goals? So who do you consider to be your peers? Is it Tulane? Is it an SMU, a team that was able to leave the American and move on to a bigger conference? You need to catch up to the schools that you should be catching up to. George Mason should not be ahead of you in revenue share. And again, I'm just saying that in the interest of being fair. That's who you need to catch up to. You need to catch up to the George Masons and the VCUs, and really let's keep it right here in Philadelphia. You need to catch up with. I should say this: it's not an apples to apples comparison. I was going to say St. Joe's. St. Joe's doesn't have football to worry about. That is a big, big, big piece of this. Villanova in a different league with NIL. I mean, they're giving, they're giving Eric Dixon and some guys on that team more than Temple's entire NIL allotment. But in basketball, you got to catch up to St. Joe's. They were able to keep somebody like Eric Reynolds. It was a big deal. They're playing in an NIL tournament next year through a relationship with Seth Berger. They're doing things that they need to do. How they do in their conference tournament remains to be seen. I'm not saying that St. Joe's has been perfect. Villanova might be making a coaching change, but you need to catch up to the schools that you are capable of catching up with. I would imagine that whatever Temple determines its rev share to be for basketball, I would think that they might be middle of the pack in the American and middle of the pack and maybe even the A10. And they need to still continue to find a way to bring in some NIL dollars that can supplement that. How about for you guys? Do you have any illusions or visions of where Temple can catch up and who they can catch up to?
I think your last point that you made where like is a big thing where Temple needs to also make sure that they're still focusing on NIL stuff outside of revenue sharing, because I could see a world where like things could get like they focus purely on just revenue sharing and don't really focus on the rest of the NIL world, when that is still a possibility. You could still find ways to help your student athletes outside of just the revenue sharing aspect of it. I mean, I think every point you made was right on the nail. I think like you mentioned, I think St. Joe is a good comparison for basketball. And while they don't have football, like you could still find ways to be competitive with them when it comes to supporting your athletes and, participating in tournaments like the NIL tournament or like stuff like that, to find ways to support athletes in other ways that it like outside of revenue sharing, I think can help put you on in that league of some of your competitors, whether it's like a Cincinnati, I know they're not in the American anymore, or an SMU, even though they're not in the American, or even like other schools that are in the American, like an FAU, North Texas, like schools like that.
Mhm.
Like you got to be in the same league as them, if not above them. They're in your conference. Like they're like obviously there's different aspects of donors in those areas, and like all that stuff matters, but they're in your conference. You have to be competitive with them when it comes to supporting your athletes and NIL. Like that is just flat out how it has to be.
I wouldn't look at it as like catching up to other schools. Like I'd first look at it as like, how can we at least find like internally what that looks like of what we're trying to like setting an in-house goal of what we're trying to look like. And then you can sit there and compare to other schools and say like, okay, like this is, we're trying to catch up to a St. Joe's or we're trying to catch up to another school, like setting the in-house example of like, this is what we expect our university to look like. This is what we expect our athletics program to look like.
I mean, Nirbanu's question is a good one in terms of catching up. I think if Temple is smart, they won't say catch up because it puts them in a position of weakness. But again, her question is a good one. Again, I'll just keep coming back to this in the interest of being fair. The only discernible goal that we have seen or heard is Arthur Johnson saying we want to win championships, which is great. That's what your athletic director should be saying. But what are you doing to win championships? When it comes to rev share, again, I'm trying to be realistic. Budgets are a part of this, conference is a part of it. But if you want to win championships, you need to set strategic, measurable, achievable goals to get there. So we will see how that plays out. We will, of course, see how things play out in Fort Worth next week with both the women's team and the men's team. We will have coverage of that really, really busy week next week with spring football practices kicking off. Really looking forward to that. Like I said, we are going to be able to see a lot of spring ball and be able to, at the very least, tell you guys who's running with the first, second, third team offenses. That will change a lot. We'll be able to talk to Casey Keeler, the coordinators. So a lot coming your way, both on the scoop and on the site as well. Again, big thank you to Diane Richardson. We hope she has a safe flight with the team down to Fort Worth. Johnny will be back here in Philly. Colin and Jay, you guys will be in Fort Worth. Colin, are you going to be jet lagged? I didn't get a chance to ask you how the trip to Columbia was with our friend Val from the Temple News. I asked Ryan for some pictures, and he showed me. I guess it was cloudy the first day you guys were down there, but it looked like an amazing trip, I would say.
It was an amazing trip. To go to your first one, I will definitely be jet lagged. I think by the time we get back from Dallas, the day before Selection Sunday, I think I'll be pretty overflying for a while. But I mean, the Columbia trip was like everything you could have asked for. I said it in a text. Like it looked like we were in Jurassic Park. Like we were in the mountains. It was just endless mountains, endless views. It was amazing food. There was a pool. It was very relaxing and a very nice. I mean, I think we were down there for 6 days, 5 days. It was like everything you could have asked for in a vacation. Just so relaxing, nice weather every day. Outside like little spots of rain, but I thoroughly enjoyed myself.
What did you think about my idea of when you said I feel like we're in Jurassic Park? What did you think of my idea of Ryan Mack talks to dinosaurs?
I think that's a great idea. I think that's something we could have easily done. Unfortunately, Ryan Mack has 4 more hours in Miami.
Imagine Ryan just playing pranks on like, oh, sorry, Mr. T-Rex. Oh, what? Are your arms too short? You couldn't reach that? Oh, my fault. A lot of endless possibilities there. Ryan, we hope you are enjoying your layover in Miami. We love you. I love you guys. Thanks for joining us for another scoop. To our listeners, again, really, really appreciate it. We will be back next week with all sorts of stuff. Spring ball, men's and women's hoops. Thanks for sticking with us for another episode. We'll talk to you next week.